Hey there, good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for joining us on our scheduled, somewhat weekly Operoo training sessions or Operoo content-specific webinars. My name is Sam Banks. I'm head of our implementation team for like the U.S. Operoo uh, and implementation customer success division. I'm sure like many of you know me, I'm taking names of some of our attendees who have joined in, and many of you I've either worked with directly or you have worked with me directly. So it's great to see you all joining us. I know for at least this afternoon, we have a large amount of registrants who had signed up to join us for our session today, taking a look at the 408 verification form, student log forms. So to make sure that everybody has a chance to join in and make sure everybody has an opportunity to get into the session for this afternoon, I am going to take a little bit of a pause. We're probably going to get started in just another minute or two, just give people a little bit of extra time to join in. As we are waiting for those individuals to join us for this afternoon, I do want to make sure that I am sharing my screen and that you guys can hear me coming through. So for those of you guys on the call, you will see there's a questions box, there's a chat area. If you guys could just let me know that you are seeing my Operoo home screen here, that you are seeing, we should be seeing screen 2. You guys can hear me. If you guys could just let me know into the chat area. I'm seeing a couple of yeses come in. Thank you for that. All good. Thank you very much, guys. And like I said, we're just going to sit tight on our home screen here for just a minute or so, and we will get ourselves started in probably the next couple of minutes. We'll give people until about about 4 past or so. So I know generally the end of the day is always a little bit busier. So bear with us for just a moment, guys. We'll make sure everybody gets a chance to hop in, and we will get started momentarily. All right, everybody. So I know we have hit just about 5 minutes past. It looks like we did have a good amount of additional people hop on along the way, which I'm sure is going to be the case as we continue through our session for this afternoon. Again, as always, thank you guys for taking the time to join us for our session for this afternoon in our Operoo weekly webinar series that we've been running over the course of the past, I think, like 4 or 5 weeks or so. For all of these sessions, for those of you that have not joined us previously, we really are going to try to run some more consistent webinars that are a little bit more focused on specific tasks and specific functions within our Operoo system, just to make sure that you guys know that these are all tools and functions and abilities that you guys have within the system that are currently available to you guys, and really just to make sure that you have as good of an understanding of the system as you possibly can. So for this particular session for this week, for those of you that have joined us, we are going to be taking a look at our 408 verification form. So specifically, we're going to be taking a look at the Operoo process for that form itself. So again, to familiarize ourselves, this is a form that's going to be used for like sign off on receipt of a student's IE, acknowledge and understand that like you understand the services and the information that's been provided within a student's IEP. Now, this is a topic that's actually going to expand a little bit further beyond just that specific form. It's actually going to lend itself to us to talk through a form type that many of you, I'm sure, are not intimately familiar with within Operoo. So this 408 forms, 408 verification form process that we're going to talk through today is actually going to rely on us using a type of form called a student log form. So to kind of talk through a little bit of what we're really gonna look at today through our session is one, kind of talking through a little bit more specifically what a student log is, a little bit more about how these forms work, and a little bit more how they operate within our site to really kind of handle this process of managing like 408s and kind of like that process for your general. Which is again going to lend itself specifically to talking about rate verification workflow. So a little bit more of how we're actually going to use the system. What we will be doing through our generally log form in our site, we will be through kind of that step-by-step process that the documentation's kind of been sent out to you guys previously in some of our most recent weekly newsletter to talk through how it is that we set up a 408 verification form, how that's going to be responded by a staff member, as well as really taking a look at how we can start to report and look at like the data for those submissions following members complete. Okay, and as always, like when we follow this up, I know we're scheduled for about an hour or so. We may or may not necessarily need to use the whole time. We may finish up a little bit early, but I do want to make sure, regardless, that we have some time for more of like a general Q&A session by the time we reach the end of our session today. So just as a little bit of housekeeping for you guys, as always on our webinars, you are all listed as muted, except for myself. And as we go through, you will see through the GoToWebinar control panel that there is a questions box where you guys can type in questions as we go through. Now, generally speaking, like I will not be like responding to these as we go through our session. I'll make sure that we kind of handle those through our dedicated like Q&A piece, when we reach the end. But please, as we go through, feel free to fill in your questions. Feel free to fill in like anything that you'd want to spend some more time talking through when we reach the end, because I do want to try to make sure that we address as many of those questions for you guys as we possibly can throughout our talking points today. Okay. So really to get ourselves started, what I want to at least initially start going through with you guys is just a brief kind of introduction, a brief kind of overview of this concept of a student log form within Operoo. Now, many of you, again, are most likely familiar with like our standard forms, the ones that we send out to our parents, emergency contact cards, like blue cards, media consents, media releases, and things like that. And generally what those are set up as, at least to start, is just a single form that is pushed out that is expecting a single response back. Like we send out a blue card, the expectation is a parent fills it out, they send it back to us, and those responses are kind of captured at least individually. These student log forms that we're going to be talking through today will lean more on the side of what we, again, have generally used in the past as a self-service style form. So I know I've spoken to many of you on the call, and some of you may have worked with either myself or Peter or John, really talking through setting up really what we have is like internal workflow processes. So things that really rely on like a self-service submission or like an optional submission associated with your students, or again potentially your staff forms. So, and if you think of something on the line, our request a per session works an OP 175. It's a form that is always constantly available that will be able to be completed and sent in, and as often or as many times as they would possibly need. This really is going to lend itself to kind of talking through this 408 process as well. Now, this student log, again, just to kind of wrap up talking through it, is a little bit different from a self-service form because it will include a question type that will allow a staff member to link a response or to link the form that they have completed to a specified student profile. So one of the things that we're going to take a look at, and we'll jump into the in just a moment to again show you a little bit more of how this works, and then kind of talk through the form creation process here for 408 specifically. What this would allow us to do is a staff member can fill out a form as many times or as often as they need, and through that student selector can link that response or link their question responses and the question data itself into a student profile that is searchable, it is reportable, and is easily accessible for like administrators and other staff members at the school who may need access to it. Okay. So with that in mind, what I would like to do is at least jump us into our Operoo demo system, our Operoo demo site. So here, again, I am taking a look at our Operoo demo school. And what I would like to at least take to show you guys first is, or just to give you an idea of what those student logs or what that student selector piece actually looks like. So here within my demo environment, of course, as always, we have a number of additional forms that have already been set up for us. I just want to zoom in on my screen just a little bit for you guys. And for the time being, I just want to open up what we have currently as sort of like a sample of a 408 form here, just to show you what the student selector question looks like. So as we start to create one of these student log forms, which is a form type, which we'll talk about momentarily, there is going to be an option for the staff member upon submission to choose a student from a list to make sure that that child is the one who gets tagged or gets identified as like the recipient or the target of that particular form. So since these are already pre-built into the form type, and again, we'll take a look at pulling out the template. We'll make sure we kind of walk you through that whole process of assigning it there. This kind of opens up this student log selector, this student log capability, to a number of different options for you guys at the school. So 408s is obviously going to be the big one that we're going to be talking through today, but it will also lend itself to a few additional workflows for some things, potentially like student behavioral logs, potentially like teacher conference notes that may be connected to a specific. But really, like this student selector piece, which again we'll talk through a little bit further when we actually see it on the teacher side, is going to be really like the heart and soul of what assigns this student as the recipient or the target of a submitted form. Okay. Now, to take a step back, and as we start to take a look through this 408 process, what I would like to start with is really how we make sure that your staff members can assign or select the students that they need to have access to using that student selector tool. So one of the things that we would see is the staff members, the access to a student or the access to like the children through that student selector is going to be based off of a staff assignment to a specific student group. So a number of our users here, I mean, again, I know from working with a number of you directly, like pre-created groups that exist within your system. It's like your grade level groups, cohort groups, potentially some of you down to like individual class sections and things like that. These groupings are going to be necessary to make sure that when a student log is created, we have the choosing groups, choosing from those to assign form to a child. So a couple of things just to talk through this, just to make sure that you guys are aware of how we can set this up if it's not done already for you. When we see these groups at the bottom left-hand corner of the page, right off of our home screen, a staff member you would be able to see those groups that you are connected to within your log environment. So just to show you guys a little bit of what this looks like, I'm actually going to pull up a staff member account. So here we are, we're taking a look right now at member account. And at the bottom of the page, what we're seeing is the group forms that a staff be associated with. For this particular teacher, I see that they're connected to 501. I see that they're connected to like class here. I would know as an administrator, if I was to out this 408 form, a student log form, or this teacher in particular would be able to select from this list from the to assign that form to a child. So for me as a teacher, this is generally going to be the piece that is most important. As we want to assign these forms out, we would need to make sure that those teachers, those staff members have access to the students that they would need to. So what I would like to do, so again, just to kind of talk through this a little bit, and some of you, again, may have some of these already pre-created for you. Some of these may already be identified within your site, is just to make sure that when we are taking a look at these groups that we know how to assign a staff member to them if necessary. Of course, if you do need any assistance with creating some of these groupings, if you do want to get down as specific as like official classes or something more, even more specific than that, you can always feel free to reach out to us and be happy to assist you guys along the ways with getting those set up. But really simply, if I need to make sure that a staff member has access to an extra group, I can always, on the left-hand side of the page, find the group that I would be looking for. So for example, here, if I'm looking at like a grade 9, 10, 11, or 12 group, on the right-hand side of the screen here, we can see our staff assignments, where we would be able to do a search in our school for those staff members. So for example, if I know that our Peter Bluestone, the staff member that we're going to be looking at a little bit later today, if I know that he needs access to a grade 9 or a grade 10 student group, or again, even a specific official class beyond that, I can search for his name over here in the staff section. I can click and drag and drop that staff member onto the group. Now, as that staff member is assigned, again, I can take a look at grade 9 here. I can see now that this staff member, this teacher, is now associated with that student group. So I would know that this teacher would have the ability to assign a student log form to any of the students associated with this group or class. Now this one, again, as always, we can spend more time talking about this a little bit later on, but just so you guys are understanding, when we talk about using these student log forms, we would need to make sure that the staff members have access to those students, are assigned to those students for the purposes of creating those forms. Okay. Great. So again, once we have like those assignments created, once we have teachers like assigned or they are granted access to the students that they need to, again, could already be the case for you guys, could be some things that we work with you on a little bit down the road. We can now start to take a look and we can start to talk through like the creation of these 408 forms. And again, kind of talking through a little bit more of how they're actually going to be used and reported on the staff side. So as we are looking at our homepage here, and I just went straight into our staff tab on the left-hand side of the page here. These 408 forms, these 408 verification forms are going to be pre-built in our system as templates for you to use. We have tried to build out kind of a standardized version of this template that you can pull down. And as always, for any of these templates or any of these forms that we've created, you can always feel free to make modifications or small edits to them as needed to make sure they fit with any of like the specific goals and needs of you guys at your school. Okay. So to really get ourselves started with this, again, logging into our Operoo account here, I'm just going to go straight down into our section here, and I'm going to add a new e-form. Okay. Now, as you guys are, I'm sure, familiar with, as soon as we start to create an e-form in the site, we're presented with our options for who our target audience is. Now, these 408 forms with these student log selectors, these student log option here, is always going to be designated as a staff form. So we'll make sure that when you guys choose to add this to your system, we would always start by choosing that we want to select from a staff form. So again, these ones would not be parent facing. These ones would not be for the students themselves to fill out. So we would make sure that we select a staff option here. Now, in terms of accessing like our best practice templates, in terms of finding like the pre-built version of this 408 here in our system, you guys can always choose this third option from the side of the list to go, which would be straight down to pull up our entire best practice lists. Now, these ones, again, are pretty extensive lists of everything that we would provide, everything that we would have like pre-created for you as a general New York City best practice option. And we know from taking a look at these, on the staff side as well as the parent, as well as on the the student side and things like that, that these sections aren't necessarily super organized. This is something that we've heard from our users, more often than not, and we are going to be taking a look over the course of the next week, over the holiday break, to make sure these are cleaned up and a little bit more organized and user friendly for you guys to find. But generally, anytime you'd like to try to find a form in our site, especially one of our best practice templates, it's always just as simple to go up to the top here where we have a search bar or a search option. And for these, because we are looking for a specified form, the 408 verification, we can always just simply type in 408 in this section. And from here, we can pull up our 408 verification form. Now we would see there is going to be an icon that shows up just to the right of this form that we've created here. It has a little the graduation cap that shows up on it, that little icon. That lets us know that this is a student log form, which means that it does have a student selector already contained in it. So from this list, again, if we would want to, we can just select this form right from here. And this will bring us into our pre-built template, our pre-identified template for our 408 verification. Now, as we take a look through these, and as always, whenever we create these forms, you can feel free to edit or modify any of the information that is present here. Now, generally what I would recommend, and some of the things that are always kind of considered our best practice options, is to take a look at some things as simple as the title at first, to make sure that you have these clearly labeled and clearly organized in a way that not only you as potentially an administrator looking for the form, but also for a staff member also searching for the form in terms of creation and submission, knows exactly what they're looking for. So right now we have something as simple as like the New York City 408 verification form, school year associated with it. Normally we would suggest you leave a school year within the title, so you can year over what your submissions have been. So for right now, I can leave this as 2021, but I would like to just, this is a little bit clearer for me, and I'm going to make sure this has a user webinar 408 verification form, just to make it a little bit easier for us to find. Okay. Now below this, and we will at least start taking a look through some of these step-by-step pieces. Again, when we're talking about some form creation, some of this is most likely very familiar for you guys. We will see our description section, and we will start to see the questions that are associated with the document, that are associated with the form that we've created. Now, a lot of these are going to be fairly standardized. A lot of these you will, generally speaking, not really need to touch that. And again, to kind of talk through that, our first piece here that we're seeing is our description section. It's that text area, it's that text field, is the information that your staff members are going to see as soon as they select this form to begin their process of filling out this document, this 408 verification. Now, these ones, we took this language. This is directly from like the header information related to like the chapter 408 that we've seen through the New York City DOE. So generally speaking, we'd say that you don't necessarily need to touch this language that shows up here. But if you do have any additional context, if there's any additional instructions or additional information that you want to provide to your staff members, like potentially if you want to give them like a point of contact if they have questions, if you want to provide them things like an email address they can reach out to if they need anything, you can always feel free to edit and modify this description section. This is really, again, just the information, just the text that they're seeing when they first go in to start filling out this form. For right now, for my purposes, I'm going to make sure that I leave this, again, as is. I don't necessarily feel like I need to make any modifications or changes to this. And then we can start scrolling down the page to look at the true question fields that are associated with this form. Now, many of these, again, we've taken directly from like the standardized IEP, like the 408 verification form that we've seen through at least the paper versions that we've seen through the DOE. So again, many of these questions we don't necessarily need to change, but I do want to spend a little bit of time talking through things like our student selector question, as well as like some of these other ones that you may want to make some small tweaks or edits or modifications to. Okay. Now, the first question that will appear on this form, which again, we generally always recommend you leave as the first question here, is that student selector piece itself. So this question one, it's clearly labeled as a student selector, where we have the option to select the student or students that we would want to connect to this document. Now, one of the functions that's a little bit different about a student selector that you would not see on any other of our question types is this checkbox that would allow us to select multiple students, or we can choose to only associate this form with a single student at a time. So with these submissions, with these student selectors, and where it kind of opens up some possibilities for some additional workflows, is we do have an option to say, as an instructor, when I fill this out, by unchecking this box and leaving this blank, it means that instructor can only select a single student at a time, which means that as they're doing their 408 verifications, they would be forced to complete a unique submission per child that they would need to create, like again, submit a verification for. This is generally for us considered like a best practice here, because there are a couple of questions that are going to show up a little in the form that are considered a little bit more student specific. But if you want to pursue that option, if you want to potentially give your staff members the option to select multiple children from their list to do a single larger submission that applies to multiple students, we can keep this box checked off, which would allow them to select multiple students from their class lists. So if I know that I have 5, 10, 15 students that I need to submit a 408 for, you have the option on the administrative side when you create this to either say, sure, a staff member can select all 5, 10, 15 of those students simultaneously for a single submission, or we can uncheck this box to say that a brand new submission must be selected per child. This is what we have seen so far is generally considered our best practice for a single submission per student. But again, depending on some of your needs and some of your goals within your school, as soon as you guys get a chance to review the form, this may be something that, again, we kind of open up to be a little bit more school specific for some of, again, your specific needs. Okay. Now, speaking some of like your more specified needs, some of your own unique updates that you may want to make. As we scroll down the page, we'll notice that an additional question that shows up here would indicate the role or the relationship of that staff member to the child, like what their role is at the school building. Now, again, these ones are sort of built off of a general understanding of what some of our needs are, of what some of your potential goals would be at the school. So these options, again, are completely editable by you. So if you recognize that you don't necessarily want to keep a incorrectly spelled paraprofessional option here, or if you don't necessarily need a submission by like a grade advisor, not necessarily a role that you would need to identify for these 408s, we can always click on these red X icons to remove those from the list. So if I want to, again, remove this option for a grade advisor, I totally can, just by clicking on these little red X icons. But if we would need to, or if you choose to add in additional roles or additional functions of a staff member at the school, just to, again, match with some of your own needs, we can also always click on this little green plus icon. This one would allow us to bring that option back. We'd be able to again add like an additional function for our staff members to select from. So again, if we want to move this out from if I want to add in that like grade advisor option again. Again, it's as simple as just clicking on that green button or clicking on these red X's to either remove or increase the capabilities that we have here. There is always something a little bit more specific that you guys would want to manage, but like we would be happy to work with you to kind of find what would work best for you along the way. Okay. So again, from here, I'm actually just going to remove that advisor option again. And then again, scrolling through the form just to kind of look at some of the questions, some of the additional features that we have here. Some simple things that we have, things like an IEP date, things like indicating the access or how an instructor, how a staff member would have access to the IEP pre-built in for you. And of course, one of the more important pieces that are going to be associated with this, again, just to touch on it fairly quickly, is a staff-based signature. So upon any of these submissions of one of these 408 verifications, we would have like a unique staff signature that would be collected, digitally through the form itself. Again, for some of the questions that we're asking, for some of the more like unique options or unique additional pieces that you may want to ask or require of your staff as you complete these, by all means, like you can feel free to make some of your own like edits or modifications as necessary. Right? Again, if you do have any additional questions associated with that, or if you want to hop on a call with us, we'd be more than happy to do that as well. Okay. So going a little bit further with this one, again, kind of talking about some of your customization options if you would need to. As we scroll down the page, we'll obviously have like our questions section, which I'm sure we've talked about in some previous webinars, some previous conversations with you guys, where we can choose to put in additional question types, put in additional question fields as needed. So if you do find that there's need to put in additional date requests, if you do want to find things like the date that a staff member received an IEP, not just when the IEP was created or submitted for the student, we can always use our date request field. We can add multiple choice, single choice questions, text line questions. Again, some of this would be a little bit more school specific depending on your goals, but by all means, you do have the option to edit, to modify, to address or add additional questions as needed. Now, the last piece for like any of these form creations that we would look to do is going to be all the way down at the bottom of the page where we do have our member selection area. The member selection down at the bottom of the page, some of you may have seen like relatively recently, most likely over the course of the past 2 weeks. This visualization has changed. So previously, this is where we would see some options for like a single like drag and drop options. We had by grouping submissions. We had what we'd call like a filtered members option. And of course, we had an option to identify a distribution to essentially what we'd call an all members group. Now, all of those all those member selection options that we had have condensed to make things hopefully a little bit more user-friendly, a little bit easier and straightforward for us to see. And all of those are generally kind of contained under what we call our filtered members option now. This drag and drop feature will still exist where we can manually assign staff members one at a time if we would like to. But this filtered members tool, if I was to go ahead and click on this, would then give us an option to show our filters so we can then more specifically assign this form to our users as we would need to. So since we're looking at this page from like a staff-facing view, this is a staff-facing we are reading here. What I'm looking at here are my staff-facing groupings. So if I would like to make sure that this self-service form, this student log form gets assigned to all of my staff members in the school, we can just simply go up to the top of the page here, and I can then assign that form to everyone within our Eagle Mountain High School group. I mean that any staff member within this site would, again, clearly have access to or would be able to complete and submit this form as necessary. If you do have some needs to make this a little bit more specific, instead of really providing this to all staff members who may not necessarily need to fill out this form, we do have some options instead for you to submit these to specific groups. So if we have a group here labeled all teachers specifically, that would mean that the 17 teachers in that group would have this, the 17 members that we've identified in this group would receive it. but again, it would not be visible, would not be accessible to the other staff in the school. So again, if you do have some things like support staff, potentially custodial users, more like generalized staff that don't necessarily have like direct access or don't work directly with the students, this would be an option for us to differentiate to make sure that it only is available to those that would truly need it. Okay. Now, for our purposes for today, I am simply just going to make sure that this is available to everyone within my school. Let's scroll down the page. I'm going to hit confirm. And I would see here I have an indication that 125 members are now selected based off of my groupings. I'm going to go ahead and hit save. Okay, I'm going to ask him, I'm sure I want to add it for 125 staff. I sure do. And really for some of these forms, because this is considered a self-service form, there is some capability for us to provide or create an approval process associated with this. And we've spoken about this one on one of our previous webinars when we talked about some of our like internal workflow processes. It may not necessarily apply to us for 408s because these are simply just going to be a sign off for completion. But if you'd like to explore the option of potentially putting in like an approval process for like an overview or review of what has been submitted, that is totally possible. Again, a little bit outside the scope of what we may be speaking about today, but it is something that, again, we've been more than happy to speak with you guys about as we start to move ourselves a little bit forward. Okay. Now, the last piece that I wanted to associate with as usual, to make sure this form is active and ready to go and available for end users to see, I'm just going to go straight into our settings tab. And as usual, this will give us an option to check off a box to enable or activate the form as necessary. Now, this is the one that as soon as we check it off and hit save, it'll make sure that this 408 is available for the staff members that we selected to actually go into their systems. They would see this form is here. And they would then, again, simply be able to go in and fill it out as necessary. Okay. Again, I've enabled this form where I've checked off the box. One other piece that we would like to mention, and it's by standard and by default here in the settings tab for any of the forms that we create, is going to be this option down at the bottom to potentially send an email notification when a form response is submitted or changed. Again, this form this function within the forms is fairly standard. We've seen this on any of the forms that we could have submitted previously, or any of the other forms that you would create within the site. So make sure that a certain staff member gets a notification as a response comes in. This one, again, is entirely optional, but if you do want to have a user that is a little bit more directly involved or a little bit more directly notified of when a submission comes in, we can always provide an email address here. So that staff member can get that direct notification anytime a new submission is completed, anytime a new submission comes in. For our purposes for right now, I am going to skip this section because I don't necessarily think a brand new notification needs to come out every single time. So I'm just simply going to go ahead and hit save and next. Now, this is another page that we are, again, going to take a little bit of a skip through. We aren't going to take a look directly at our triggers for right now. So I know we do have some documentation, some conversations come out recently around these. So one of the last pieces that I would like to mention related to these student log forms is that you will see as we go through this form creation process, up in the top right corner of the page, we have something that will allow us to either download a QR code or to potentially copy a URL or a hyperlink that can then be shared out with our staff members. So as long as this form is active and as long as this is enabled, you'll have some opportunity to share this, again, via hyperlink that you could put onto potentially like a school resources website. You can potentially download and print out this QR code, post it within, out in front of like a guidance office, post it out in front of like the main office in the building. So as staff members know that they have these to complete, they can simply hold up a phone, hold up their smartphone to this. It would directly open up the form after asking them to sign into Operoo, which would really just make sure that this is constantly accessible and constantly easy to find on their side. Again, the QR code could be scanned by any smartphone with a camera feature associated with it, and the hyperlink, the URL, is going to be able to, again, be posted to like a school resource website or even shared out with staff members via an email following an IEP meeting. As soon as you're done, hey, staff members, click this link, sign into Operoo, and they'd be directly brought in to complete or fill in their 408 form. Okay. So now that we have this form created, now that this form is considered enabled and assigned to our staff members, what I would like to do is show you a little bit more of the user experience on a staff side, just so I can clearly see what this looks like to submit and complete one of these 408 forms. So I'm going to go back into my home page here, and I will end up bringing up my staff page. So again, this is like the desktop. This is the browser version of our Operoo system. This is what I would see as a staff member when I sign into the system, not the true administrative view that we've seen earlier. And to access these forms, to go and to start filling out a 408 for students within my classes, again, we could either access this through the QR code. If you have some users that are a little bit more tech savvy, you could always share out the hyperlink URL that's created within that form page, so they can directly click on the link and get brought into the form. But if you have staff members that are currently logged into the Operoo system, if they are a little bit familiar with this, they can always access these self-service, these student log forms within their site under what we call the form library up in the top right-hand corner of the page. When I go to click on this section, when I click on this area of the site, I will be brought in to see any of the forms that are currently created and shared with me in this self-service area. So all of these forms that I'm seeing, all of these ones that allow me to submit a new form for my high school, are these self-service forms that can be pulled down and used as often or as many times as needed. So for this, and again, I have a number of additional forms that are showing up here. This is a lot busier than what we would normally see through like a true end user experience. If I know that I need to fill out this 408, I can just scroll through my list. I can find the form in question. So here we have our user webinar 408 verification form for 2020-2021. I can simply go in at this point and start my form. So what I can see from my end here, as we've kind of discussed, is now this is going to be a standard Operoo style view. This is the standard, like, linear, mobile-friendly, browser-friendly view of the document that we've created. Just to quickly go through what we're looking at here, we have our text section, we have our description area that shows up at the top of the page, providing the context, providing like the information that I would be signing off on, reviewing, understanding about my students for this 408 process. And then I would start to see the question fields that are connected to this form. Now, this first one that we're seeing, again, the student selector, the student log selection itself, I would see that I simply have an option here to choose the students that I want to connect this log to. Right now I see that none are currently selected. When I choose from this list, again, I would see my collection of students that I have access to as a staff member. So this is bringing us back to where we first started, talking about the group associations, the staff member assignments to groups of students. If that piece is not done, or again, if staff members do not have access to certain students, they would not see them from this student selector page. So it is important prior to going through this process to either work with us on the Operoo side. We'd be more than happy to help you set those groups up, or just to simply review that the staff members that would need to fill out these forms have access to those children. And again, we can always kind of assist you guys with that. During some one-on-one trainings or some unique one-off time that we can put together. Okay. Now this area is searchable. So if I would like to find a particular child, I can always pull through the list, search by name. I'm going to choose one of my favorite students within our school here, Jabril. And as soon as I click on his name as a student, I would see that I now have my selected student assigned at the bottom of this section. And this is where that link occurs. This is where any of the additional information that I fill in on this document or this form in general is going to be directly tied to this student, directly tied to that student profile page. So from here, again, I've selected my child, and as we discussed, if you choose to assign multiple students to this list, this is where we would then be able to continue assigning or grabbing multiple students as necessary. we would see, because if you remember, I did set this up to be only a single student selection. You see it does not allow me to assign multiple children here, but if necessary, again, we can make that assignment on the form creation page. We can choose to allow staff members to select multiple students. So from here, again, I'm just going to confirm, to assign my student Jabril. We would see that this student is now going to be identified as selected. And then I can go through and fill out my form as necessary. What is my role? I'm the teacher. What was the IEP date of the IEP here? And I'm just going to select our current date as of today. How did I gain access to the IEP? This is like an electronic access, an electronic copy. And then down at the bottom of the form, again, simply what we have here is just an option for the teacher to type in their name. Got my name here, Sam Banks. And then I can use my mouse to put in my beautiful signature down at the bottom of the screen here. So again, depending on where your staff members are filling this out from, whether it's mobile on the Operoo Central or CareMonkey app, they'd be able to sign this with their finger. Or again, in my case, I'm using a desktop, so I am able to use my mouse to make the signature here. And from that point, I can simply go and submit my form. Now, once this submission has come in, once this submission has been made, you will be able to start to view those responses that are connected to a specific child. Now, that can be done in a few different areas. Since these student logs are like assigned again to a student profile, since it is a piece that is connected to the child directly, these student logs can be viewable by other staff members that work with that student directly through the staff-facing login of the system. But it can also be viewed and reported and downloaded and brought out to like an Excel version of the form or an Excel version of the file on the administrative side of the site. So really when we think of these log forms, again, if we understand that these forms will be available to any staff member that has direct access to work with a child. Again, mostly that is going to be identified by the student groupings that we see at the bottom of the page. So for my particular students here, if I would ever need to see a log that was connected or a log that was associated with a particular child, I can go directly into my student groupings. So I can see for my class 501, I'm going to go into view my 24 students. And on the staff-facing side of the house, we will be presented with this view. This is the staff-facing view, seeing the students that they work with. Now, for any of these student profiles that we're looking through, there is going to be a section, and you may have seen it before if you've worked on the staff side of the house, or potentially if you pulled up like a student record on the administrative view, you would have seen this option for student logs. But if I go straight through and click on this option for Jabril, what I would see would be a collection of any of the student logs that have been associated with that particular child. So here, again, we have a number of different 408 verification submissions that have come in for like a number of our samples that we've done a little bit earlier throughout this year. But as I can see, I have, if I was to look at my user webinar here, so this is the one that we had just made a submission for. I have a submission date, I have a timestamp, and I can see who it was that has made that submission. So I can see Peter Bluestone has made a submission of this 408 verification for Jabril at this date and at this time. Now, at any point, if I was a staff member, if I needed to see these a little bit further, if I needed to take a look at what I'd made a submission of, can always click on this option to make a view or an edit of that particular submission, which will bring you right back into your particular form. So this is my submission for this particular child, or potentially, again, if I need to adjust, maybe my IEP date was incorrect, maybe it was really the 24th, I can go back in, resubmit the form. And again, pulling up that student, I'd be able to see my now current submission associated with the child. And so again, just going quickly, going right into the student log section. Right now I have a new submission date. Now I have a new updated timestamp associated with that document. Okay. Now from this section as well, as we're seeing it, we do have an ability to add in additional new logs directly from here. So if I am looking at this section potentially as a staff member, and I know I need to make an updated submission for a child, an IEP changes, some updated information comes out with that. We have a new IEP meeting for the student. we can always come back in and submit additional logs as necessary. The part that's going to be important for this as we start to look at this on the administrative side of the system, that we will have timestamps, we will have dates, we will be able to track when those submissions came in, either per staff member or potentially per student. So we will have some reporting capabilities to really differentiate for us and allow us to see when was this form submitted and by who. Now with that segue, what I would like to start showing you guys at this point now is what this would look like a little bit more on the administrative side of the house. So if I do want to start to track some of these logs or these submissions for my staff members as an admin, just collectively across the board, how would we be able to do that? So for these particular forms, like for any of our submissions that we would have, as usual, we would be able to view these directly within our form library page. So as an administrator, if I was, I can always go directly into our form library screen. Third tab down on the left-hand side of the page here. And I would be able to do potentially do a quick search for either 408s if it's something that you've created a number of already, or if it depending on the order or the again, like the amount of forms that you have, it could just potentially be the one that's at the top of the list based off your time of creation. But I can see right here for my particular form that my 408 verification is right here at the top of the screen. Now this view that we would be pulling up, this view that we'd see here through the form library, is a little bit more of like the table based. It is a little bit more of the data friendly view, where we would be able to start pulling like those big picture reviews, those big picture data dumps of who has made a submission for what student at one time. Think of this one as kind of like your general go-to for any of the true submissions or any of like the true completions that you would want to track or to really check on for each of your students. Now in this section here, really what we'd start to see is the standard table style view down at the bottom of the page with some very basic information collected here. The first thing that we would really see is that we're going to have a staff member view, where right now we're only seeing the information for the user who has made a submission. So as of right now, all that I can see on this page is that Peter Bluestone, I see his member ID, his staff ID, made a submission on March 25th, and that's essentially it. What we can start to do from this page, depending on how you'd want to start looking at some of your data, is we can start to add in or use this option here to show and hide additional data columns, which will allow us to choose additional data points from that form that we may want to display on this page. So if you do just want to do some quick sorting and filtering within this table style view, I can make my selection of students. Maybe I want to do a filter by role, filter by date, indicate what type of access they had to the IEP, or potentially even just want to see the signatures associated with that form. I can go through and check off these boxes. I can hit confirm. And now as I take a scroll through my list, I can start to see everything that we had selected, the students that have been chosen, the role of the individual, the date of the IEP, what type of access, and then again, importantly, we'd be able to see the signature associated with that as well. Again, depending on how you have your form set up, depending if you are making individual submissions per child or multiple submissions for groups of children, they would all be posted within the student section here. So the students question that we have. Now right now, because this is student specific, because you're only making one submission per child, we would have like a pretty easy filter and sort as we look at this to see how many have been completed for Jabril, how many have been completed for Diana or Sam or Lachlan, whoever it is that we're making a true submission for. Now this table style view is again kind of more of like a visual option. It does allow you to kind of scroll through and make do some of your own filtering and sorting based off of our columns here. But another really easy option for you guys to view some of this data is going to be up in the top left under our actions menu. Now this actions menu will allow us to do a couple of different things. For one, we can export these directly to like an Excel spreadsheet. So if you are a little bit more comfortable filtering through some of your form responses through Excel, we can pull out this full Excel spreadsheet. You'll be able to slap on your own filtering and sorting tools to kind of grab a bigger picture, more easily manipulated set of data that you can play around with. These ones can, again, pulling this out to an Excel can kind of let you do your own like Excel wizardry, kind of play around with it a little bit more directly in the way that you would see fit. Okay. Now, as necessary with some of these forms as well, if there is any need or any desire to do like a print for like physical copies of these, we can always work with you guys on this one as well. Generally for right now, I think this template that we have is just generally going to be printing out in the standard Operoo style form. But if we do want to have like a PDF based version that would match a little bit more specifically with like a standard copy to keep in a physical file, that's something we can always work with you guys on as well. Now again, here what we've taken a look at on the administrative side is more of like the data friendly view, the data style view, but there is an option through the administrative end if I was to go back into my students page where I can have that same student log view that I had on the teacher's end. So if I know as an administrator, potentially I'm a member of like the guidance department that has administrative access to the system, or I'm thinking like another administrator might need to pull up a list of who has signed, who has completed a verification for a student. If I was to go directly into a student profile here, so I'm just going to pull up the 3-line icon for Jabril. Again, I would see on the left-hand side here a student log option, a student log selector that shows up through this page. I'd be able to see here again by scrolling down through the list. Here's my 408 verification for this year for our particular needs. I can see when it was submitted, and I can see it was submitted by who. So for some of these, as I can take a look, so this is another sample, another version that we'd run a little bit earlier, I can start to see a clear designation or a clear separation of what was submitted by who and when. So I can start to track, okay, I can see Peter made a submission on September 24th. I can see Sam made a submission on September 25th. So I can start to track just by looking at this a little bit more visually, which staff members may still be outstanding for completing these forms. Because again, in terms of what we would really need to check, it's not only that it was completed for the student, but it was completed by each teacher for the student. So between the combination of looking at these directly through either a student profile, a student record, or potentially even looking at these through the data tables, through the Excel sheet options, we would have some clear indications for us of who has done this versus who has not, which would kind of make things a little bit easier for you guys to start to track down and try to view a little bit more on your end. Yeah, I know we've gone through a good amount of information for us so far. I'm running a little bit close on time here, but I do just want to make sure that we have a little bit of time to talk through potentially some additional workflows or some additional options of what we could put in place for some of these 408 verification forms. Not even just necessarily 408s, but really talking about student logs in general. So because student logs do give you an option to start to assign something directly to a child, it is connected in like immediately to a student account. We can start to work with you guys to talk through some options like a behavioral log or an incident report. So then it has like a standardized set of questions that a teacher may need to assign directly to a student. Some additional ones that we may have here, parent callouts, parent contact logs. Again, because these can be completed both by staff members and by administrators, and they're viewable by anybody who has access to that child. I can see like a full and complete log of what when was it that Diana last made a phone call home to a parent? When was it that the last time that Sam as the administrator called to set up like an IEP meeting or a conversation about that particular child's behavior or something like that? All of these are some things that we can kind of work with you guys along the way. Again, I know running a little bit short on time, we won't really dive into all of the specifics of those right now. Again, just kind of thinking about some of that process, making a selection, assigning it directly to a child, connecting it directly to their profile, which is searchable, which is reportable, is really what we're looking at here for a lot of these student log capabilities. Okay. Now, what I'd like to do for us right now, again, with a couple or so minutes left, I do want to put up this this page, this screen right up in front of us. This is a one-on-one training request for us. I know we've seen like a large number of you guys have filled this out in the past in terms of requesting a one-on-one training with either myself, with Peter, with John, potentially with anyone from our team, so we can you guys through maybe even a little bit more of what we've seen today, even if you guys would want to set up some additional time for us to meet. So as I start to look through some of the questions that we have in our question box, because I do want to keep ourselves honest and answer those if we do have any waiting here in the wings for us, please keep this in mind. If you do want to request a training, you can hold your phone up to this QR code, and we can answer that and set up some time with you guys as we go through. So the question that I'm seeing here, and it looks like we only have one that's kind of like waiting for us here, is how is a student's IEP attached to that student? So that's a really good question. So when we talk about like assigning things like an IEP, like assigning a document, assigning like something more specific to a child, there's really two ways for us to do that. One of those ways is going to be through us using the student log option, where potentially we can create like a self-service style IEP form, where like a guidance counselor, an instructor, a special ed coordinator can fill that out and attach and provide like an attachment connected to the student. There's also an option for us to assign what we call a private note to a child that would allow you to attach, attach like a document, attach any type of upload that you would need to. So to quickly show you through those options, and again, I want to keep us a little bit honest with time here, so thank you guys for sticking around a couple minutes longer. The first one that I want to show you is just really simply through like a student log style form. These ones can be really quick and really straightforward to set up. So if I was here within my home page, I can go to add a new form, and I can go to add a new staff form. Now, for this particular submission, for this particular workflow, we don't have a pre-built template for you guys. So this could be one that we build out with you guys from scratch using a blank form. But when I go to create a blank form in the system, especially for those that are dedicated to staff members, you will see an option for us to create a student log form. So this is a self-service form with that student selector connected to a child. So if I was to make this selection here, probably like a really quick workaround, a really quick option for this is to put in our title. So this can be like an IEP submission. Let's say 2022. I was never known for being exceptionally creative, so we can come with a more unique title. Down here at the bottom, and again, I can kind of just like skip through our description section for right now. We can say, select student you are attaching an IEP for. For this one, I would definitely suggest that we only allow people to make a single submission for a student, because we would obviously not want to attach multiple children to a single IEP. And then down at the bottom of the page, if we want to keep this exceptionally simple, we can put in what's called an attachment request. This is where we can assign a staff member with a question type that would require them to submit either a scanned copy or an image of a file that would then be accessible to other staff members that work with the student. So again, for example, here, if I wanted to say, please attach a scanned copy of the IEP. That special ed coordinator, a guidance counselor, whoever it is that's working to create that document can then select the child. They would attach or upload the document that would be connected with that child. And as soon as they save or submit it, it would always be available as one of those student logs that's connected to a student profile. So later on, myself, somebody like another teacher, another colleague, whoever it is that's working with that student that has access to them in Operoo, would be able to pull up that form, would be able to pull up that document and view it here directly in the student profile. Okay. Now there is an additional option with this, and just to quickly show you guys, just so you have an idea of how this could work, this would be an option if people were looking to create a log form, again, a self-service form that could be connected here. There's also an option for those with like administrative access, and even for like people with staff-facing access to a student. If I was to open up a 3-line icon for a child, where I can see what are called private notes associated with a student. These private notes here, if I was to click on this, I can see an option to add a new private note, or I can view previous private notes that have been assigned to a child. So if I wanted to add a new one, and I can see I already have like a sample IEP that's been attached for this student, if I add a new private note here, I can provide it with a title, I can provide it with some context. This is like an updated student IEP, from meeting 325 or something like that. I can use a file for my desktop, for my laptop, whatever it might be. I'm not gonna make a submission of that just now, but when I make that save, when I add that to a student and go back into the profile, now I would see there's an additional note that's connected to the student. There is an attachment on this one, but if I had, that would again be readily accessible to any administrator, any staff member, whoever it is that's working directly with that student. Really good question though, and nice to know that there's a few different workflows that we can, depending on what might work a little bit better for you guys, and depending on one, access to the system, administrative versus staff access, but also in terms of like a process of what you'd want to put for them. Now I am taking a look. I don't see that there are any other questions that have come through for us right now. So I am just really quickly going to bring this back up for us. Again, if you guys are interested in setting up some one-on-one time to work with us directly, if you do want to request some time to work, either myself, Peter, John, like anyone from our team to kind of talk through some of these options, talk through student logs, talk through setting up your 408s, please do not hesitate to reach out to us either directly. I'm sure we have, many of you have our emails, if not our personal phone numbers that you can reach out to at any time, or of course you can hold up your phone and scan this document, scan this QR code here, which will bring you directly to a training request form that we monitor fairly actively. Now, with that being said, thank you for your time for the stuff for joining us for like an hour and change a little bit. Thank you guys for spending the time to stick around a couple minutes extra to go through some of the questions that we've seen here. Just so you guys know, we will be sending out a recording of this webinar for today. I know many of you had been able to join us, but if you have any colleagues that would like to view it a little bit down the line, you can always share that recording out with them. Next week, we know that it is vacation week, so we hope in the nicest way possible that we don't hear from you, that you guys are actually getting out and enjoying your time off, especially after the crazy year that we've had as we start to get closed out on the remainder of the school year. And as always, if there is any help that we can provide, feel free to reach out to us, go through our support team, or feel free to schedule a session with us through our one-on-one training log. Okay. So thank you guys for your time. I hope you're able to take something away and learn something a little bit this afternoon. I'm going to stick around for the next minute or so just to make sure that there's no other questions that have come through. But again, thank you guys for your time. Have a great rest of the afternoon and have a great rest of your day. Thank you. All right, guys, thank you very much again for joining us. I haven't seen any other questions come through, and I see a majority of people started to hop off at this point. So I am going to close down the session. So again, thank you guys for your time. If you do, please don't hesitate to reach out to us, and we'll be speaking soon enough. Thank you, everybody.